Hello and welcome to Grouchy Geeks, episode 41. My name's Steve and my co-host is Scott.
Hello.
This episode we've got some news and reviews for a bit, and then for our main feature we're going to do part 2 of our favourite or influential film directors, which we'll come back to in a bit. But in the meantime, what news, Scott?
So a lot has happened today. 24 hours is a long time in genre things. Yeah. So there's a number of interesting things. I'm gonna pick one that I think you might not be having on your list, but we'll see. But it's lots of stuff has come out related to Disney announcements.
Okay.
Something that's I found worrying but interesting is that now we know that in the last few months, Disney bought a large chunk of Fox. Yep. So they didn't buy the company entirely, but they bought a large chunk of Fox. And there's been lots of discussion about, well, that means now things like the X-Men and Fantastic Four are sort of bought under the Disney banner so they could be part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Yeah. But it looks like one of the properties that they're thinking about trying to breathe new life in is, interestingly, the Alien franchise. I don't know if you've heard this.
No, I haven't.
So it looks to be more than just a rumor, but it looks like they're going to attempt to reboot Alien, which can only be a good thing to me because I loved the original 2 Alien films. I sort of cautiously loved the third and fourth, and then I've enjoyed the sequels, but they've been fatally flawed in so many ways. And didn't really feel like they were part of sort of the original series. So attempting to do something new with the Alien franchises is interesting, but slightly worrying.
It's that thing of where James Cameron's now come back and said, I'm ignoring all of the Terminator films, apart from the first 2 that I've done.
Yeah.
And therefore we'll go forward and do new stories. I kind of wish they'd do that instead, rather than just reboot it. Go, yeah, we like the bits that we like. We're going to keep them, and we ignore everything else. And this story takes place after Aliens. I think I'd prefer that they did that. I mean, it doesn't have to have Ellen Ripley in it, but there could still be some connective tissue to it and the good content. I mean, like Michael Biehn could come back as an old scarred soldier and blah, 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 and, whatever else they might talk about it, and they connected it. And I know that, is it Neil Blomkamp came up with a great idea, and it had all this buy-in, and all of a sudden it just went away and disappeared. And everybody was on board with it, even including Sigourney Weaver and Michael Biehn and stuff. So I wish they'd look at those kind of things rather than just a straight reboot, which makes no sense to me, because it's not going to appeal to the existing fans. And new fans, they may have vaguely heard of it, so why not build upon the good foundation and get both sets of fans on board?
Yeah, we'll see. It's obviously like crazy early days yet, so we don't know exactly what they're going to do, but it's interesting if nothing else.
Yeah. So in TV land, the streaming wars continue, and currently still in prime positions are, of course, Amazon and Netflix, but new kids on the block are coming up, and one of them is, of course, Apple TV, where they've got their lots of new shows. They announced their flagship shows that are coming up, and they're very expensive. And one thing we talked about in the past is they don't tend to release their figures for anything to say how well they're doing, but there have been exceptions. And recently, Amazon have said The Boys has been both a critical and a commercial success for them, and it's become one of the service's most watched series of all time.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about The Boys as well. So have you watched the whole season?
Yes.
Yes, I have as well, and I absolutely loved it. I've thought it was one of the best things I've seen in a really long time.
In this glut of everything that we have, there's a massive glut of superhero TV shows, some good, some bad, that started with Arrow and over at DC, and then you have lots of Marvel ones that we had through Netflix, and now there's all of the ones that Marvel are doing through their own thing. So there's all these sorts of, not by the book, but very familiar. So to have something that's so atypical, and you've got Watchmen, of course, and now there's a TV series, and then you've got The Boys, which is so much against superheroes and the idea of them being perfect people. It is a bit of a departure in places from the comic, which I've read for a few trades, but I actually think the TV show is better than the comic book.
So I've never read the comic before, but interestingly, I enjoyed the show so much that I've started to read the comic. So I'm now on the second trade of the comic, and somebody that I work with warned me about it. So
not safe to read in public at all.
Yes, so I was like, oh, I've really enjoyed it. I'm gonna start reading the. So if you've got an Amazon Prime subscription, which you need to watch The Boys anyway, the first trade is free. So I've read the first trade. I've paid for the second one, but it was very cheap. It was like $3.99.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go and read the comic, I think. And he was like, are you sure? I was like, are you sure you want to do that? But it's one of those things that I've been warned about so much by so many people.
Yeah,
I'm kind of. It's not the stuff that would probably be shocking isn't really shocking to me because I'm just kind of expecting it all.
Yeah,
but yeah, I'm enjoying the comic. It's clearly already very different from what's happening in the TV show. I'm not going to mention what it is or some of the things because it will simultaneously spoil both the comic and the TV show, and I don't want to do that. But yeah, they're definitely their own beast, and the TV show borrows a lot from the comic, but it's its own thing, and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was brilliant, and it feels, what. Watchmen, which I love as well. One of the things that Watchmen was trying to do is to treat superheroes in a realistic way, and this is what it's trying to do as well. And it feels like this is much more realistic, where they have essentially sponsorship from mega corporations that are doing deals with cities about which hero is going to work on their turf and stuff like that, and all that side of things actually felt very real to me. So it's interesting. Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. If you've got Amazon Prime and you've not watched it, I'd definitely recommend it because I just thought it was just superb. Yeah,
there were changes big and small in a TV show, and some of the stuff that's reasonably nail-biting and uncomfortable in the TV show is turned up massively in the comic to the point that it's really unpleasant. So I don't think it was just a matter of toning it down. I think it was rejigging some of it to make it more relevant. So to bring in things like social media, which wasn't a thing when it was written. And so they've updated it, I think, in an interesting way. But anyway, right, what else have you got?
So a piece of confusing news that I'm hoping you will help me make sense of. Okay. Which is we all woke up this morning to news that a fourth Matrix film that nobody was asking for is now in the pipeline. So I don't know what your opinion of that is. It seems like a very strange thing to me.
Well, there's only one Matrix film, of course, remember. So the fact that now there's a fourth one, I don't really understand that. That's baffling to me. As someone said, we were talking today, they think they're trying to capitalize on the popularity of Keanu Reeves at the moment. John Wick has made him an even bigger star, and some people kind of forgot about him and didn't think he could do action. And then you're like, hello, have you not seen The Matrix? And many other things he's done, but this has brought him back into the focus as a leading action hero 20 years on from The Matrix. I remember this, when they asked Lawrence Fishburne, I think he just finished the third one, and maybe it was like 10 years on, and someone said to him, would you ever do another Matrix film? And he's like, okay, no, because when I did that one, I was this age. Now, it hurts. It hurts when I get up in the morning. It hurts when I do this. You want me to do the Kung Fu and the trick? No. So another 10 years on from then, there's no way you'd get Lawrence Fishburne doing it. And yet, Keanu, who has a portrait somewhere in his room, that doesn't, that's aging while he doesn't age, is jumping back in with both feet.
Mm-hmm.
I've no interest in this at all. It's just as we've been talking about the Alien franchise and bringing it back and doing something different. There wasn't any need for a Matrix 2 or 3, despite some good fight scenes and so on, and special effects. I don't see the point unless they're going to do something really interesting with the story. But at the moment, I just think, why? What about you?
Yeah, it's an utterly bizarre announcement. Out of all the things that I thought they were going to do a sequel to, I would never have imagined this. One of the things that seems interesting is, as far as I know, in the past, it's always been, especially on the Matrix films, but in all of the other stuff that they've done, it's always been the Wachowskis working on stuff together. Yeah. So they always did that in the movies. They did that with Sense8. Like they came as a pair basically. But in the announcements that I've read, they're only mentioning Lana Wachowski. Mm-hmm. They're not mentioning, and I've forgotten what their name is, but they're not mentioning the other one at all.
No,
which seems like, maybe they've gone their separate ways. It just seemed the lack of a mention of the other Wachowski sibling seemed almost the most significant thing about the announcement to me.
Yeah. But Carrie-Anne Moss and Keanu Reeves and Lana Wachowski, Matrix 4, and you're like, okay. So, but they're going to have to call it something else, aren't they? They're going to call it Matrix Revitalized or Matrix Retooled or something, because they're not going to put a number 4 in, even though it's it technically is. They're not doing Fast and Furious things where they have to put numbers in.
Yeah, I can't even remember what the sequels are called. There's a Matrix
Reloaded, and Revolutions. I think, or Revolution. I don't know, but it'll be something. Rejiggered.
Matrix Resurrected.
Maybe. Yeah, they're resurrecting the tired, and I don't know. I'm out.
Yeah.
A little bit of interesting news of something that's coming. We don't even have a date yet. All we know it's going to be next year. So, Joss Whedon is working on a new TV show for HBO.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So it's called The Nevers, and it's being described as epic science fiction drama about a gang of Victorian women who have unusual abilities.
Mm-hmm.
So that's about all we know, and they've now been announcing a whole bunch of people of casting and lots of this kind of thing. HBO's talking about it, but they're not. So I read the press release, I went through and I recognized some of the names. Nowhere does it say who's going to be coming, when the show is going to be appearing. So Joss Whedon is serving as the showrunner, executive producer, writer, and director, but also he's got some familiar faces including Doug Petrie and Jane Espenson, who've worked on him with many of his other projects. So that's really interesting. It's not quite a Buffy reunion, but it's like a mini reunion.
Mm-hmm.
And I won't go through the cast, but the two interesting names that stood out for me were, one is Nick Frost.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, that's cool.
Which is after his comedy things and all the rest of it, but then you've seen him in Into the Badlands. That was quite a departure, but interesting and fun. And the other one is an actor called Pip Torrens. I don't know if you've seen him in anything.
The name doesn't ring a bell.
So he's been most recently in The Crown, and then he was in Preacher.
Okay, so I didn't watch. The Crown, just not my sort of thing at all.
Yeah.
And actually, Preacher is my sort of thing, but I found it really difficult to get into. Mm-hmm. So obviously, another Garth Ennis comic, but the tone of the TV show Preacher, I just didn't. It didn't draw me in at all. Even though everybody else says it's really good, so that's probably why I'm not that familiar with the name.
That's okay, but yeah. So there's lots of actors, and I'm thinking, okay, but when is it coming? I want to know. Mm-hmm. We don't know how many episodes. But given it's HBO, it's probably going to be 10 or 13, I would guess.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point next year, that's about all we have. So I'm hoping for some more definitive news in the next few months.
Mm-hmm. And is Dollhouse the last thing he did in TV? It seems like an age ago, but
because since then he did Avengers 1, 2. He did some work on Justice League. He's done a couple of things, hasn't he? So he went to film, and now he's come back to TV again. So
brilliant to see him coming back to TV.
Oh yes, I can't wait.
So I have one more piece of news.
Okay.
I'm not even sure. Do we want to talk about the Spider-Man thing?
Well, briefly we can do.
Okay. So as we know, Sony owns the movie rights to Spider-Man.
Yes.
They don't own the comics, they don't own the merchandise, they don't own anything else, but they have the movie rights.
Yeah.
And so it was a lovely surprise when we got to see Spider-Man first appearing in Captain America: Civil War, and then since then he's had his own two of his own. Just Spider-Man movies in the MCU, but on top of that we've also had him in a bunch of other things like Infinity War and Endgame and so on. So it looked like it was time to renegotiate the deal, and it appears that Disney came up with an offer that Sony didn't like, and they've refused to find middle ground. So he's now leaving the MCU, which I thought was really interesting. So it still looks like Tom Holland is going to be Spider-Man in the upcoming Spider-Man films, but he's just going to be disappearing from the MCU, which I found really interesting, and I found sort of details of the deal which has now come out that I had no idea about before really interesting as well. I don't know how much you've looked into it. It's
all to do with how much money they each is willing to put forward and the rights and all that kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So for Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man Far From Home, the deal that they'd worked out is, even though they're in the MCU, it was actually Sony got 95% of the profits from those films, and Marvel just got 5%.
Wow!
But that was on top of Marvel also made all of the profits from Tom Holland as Spider-Man appearing in Civil War and Endgame and Infinity War. Yeah. So they got all of that pie, and because Disney owned the merchandising rights, they all of the dolls and Happy Meals or whatever it was that they were selling,
everything.
Yeah, they got all the money from that. So although it looked like a ludicrous deal, actually it kind of worked out really well for Disney that they were giving away 95% of the profits from these two massively profitable movies. So Far From Home, I think, took $1.2 billion at the box office. Wow. So we're talking huge amounts of money. The deal that they wanted to go forward with Fox was a 50-50 split. Fox. The deal that went with Sony was a 50-50 split.
Yeah.
Which Fox just weren't happy. I keep saying Fox, which Sony weren't happy with, decided to walk away from, which kind of sounds a little bit ludicrous. But when you think that actually the money that they would have, if they had that deal from Spider-Man Far From Home, which made $1.2 billion at the box office, they would have made less money from Far From Home than they made off of Venom. So,
ouch.
But Venom, this is the ridiculous thing, right? Everybody hates Venom.
I haven't seen it,
but
it
turned over $850 million at the box office.
Oh.
So it was a massively successful film. But even though it looked like it was a reasonable deal, actually, if you run the numbers, it probably wasn't that good a deal for Sony. And Disney seems to be on social media, which I don't follow anymore, but Disney seems to be kind of coming out as the side that everybody's siding on. But we'll see. It's interesting. It could be. It could just be a negotiation tactic, and they could, in a couple of months' time, they could, kiss and make up, come up with a different deal, and something will go ahead. But for the time being, at least, that's the last that we've seen of Spider-Man interacting with anybody else in the MCU, which is fine because we got Endgame right, and now we're in a new phase. The impact doesn't actually seem all that bad. It's like it's not like the MCU is completely dependent upon him.
No,
going forwards.
No, but it's a shame because Tom Holland's great, and he works very well with lots of the other actors, as we've seen over the years in the various films that he's been in. So I would have liked to have seen that continue. And it's not a spoiler because we've seen in the trailers for this Spider-Man Far From Home, which I haven't seen. Like Nick Fury appears in it, and Kobe Smulders she appears in it as Maria Hill, and so there are people popping up, but you won't get any of that now. So none of this. Oh, will we get someone in the credits? The answer will be no, because you can't. Oh, right, okay. So that's a shame. It's a shame to see, but yeah, as you say, hopefully they'll come to some sort of terms and work it out for the show for the viewers. One final bit of quick news from me. Now that Game of Thrones is completely wrapped up and done, everybody is basically looking for the next Game of Thrones in terms of a fantasy-based TV show that will make them billions and billions of dollars. That's what they want. Amazon are investing in 2. They bought the rights to the Tolkien estate, and they're developing that into a TV show. They're also doing a live-action TV series based on the Wheel of Time series of books by Robert Jordan, and this is a 15-book series. It's done. It's completely finished. He died, actually, before he finished, and another author, Brandon Sanson, wrote the final books. He was chosen by Robert Jordan to finish the series. So that's one. That's 2 on Amazon's side. Netflix have The Witcher, and a bunch of others, I'm sure, because Patrick Rothfuss's books have been purchased for TV and film too. So it's a case of they're throwing a lot of money into fantasy TV shows at the moment in the hope that one sparks to the same level and gets that lightning in a bottle thing.
And I can't remember, even though you only just said the list, I can't remember whether you mentioned it. Did you mention Dark Materials as well?
No, that's another one. So that's BBC have paid a lot for that. So that's 5 that I know of at least, and I'm sure there are others I've just forgotten. But yeah, plus of course there is a Game of Thrones spin-off, which is a 1,000-year in the past prequel. So fantasy is very, very big. I guess we'll see if anything rises to the top and keeps going beyond like a couple of seasons.
Yeah, I mean, interesting times. It will be interesting to see if anything fills that Game of Thrones size hole. My feeling is kind of that there won't be. Things like Game of Thrones. They're not 10 a penny, and it's one of those shows where the whole sort of became more than the sum of the individual parts. Yeah. Like it was always a great show, but actually having something like that just seems to capture everybody's imagination just doesn't come along every day. And I'm sure these things will be great and successful. His Dark Materials are some of my favorite books. So I'm really keen to see them do a great job of that. And I thought the trailer was really exciting. The Lord of the Rings stuff is strange because there's huge chunks of the Tolkien IP that have been sold off that they can't include. So I think it's like set thousands of years before what the stuff that's in the Lord of the Rings movies and the Hobbits movies and things like that, because there's so many things that they have to steer clear of. That they basically can't go near any of the things that we associate with The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how they cope with that. But yeah, interesting times ahead.
Big things on fantasy and TV. So there you go. Just saying the rights are available to a very good series of books that I'm aware of. Just but I'll put them out there.
It's only a matter of time.
I'd like to believe so. Right, should we move on to the main feature?
Sure.
Okay.
Welcome back. So this is part 2 of our very sporadic walk through some of our favourite directors. So last time we picked a couple of directors each, talked about what we loved about them, their movies, and we're gonna carry on the list. So there's plenty that we could talk through because there's just so many such brilliant directors out there. So every single time we can't think of something to do for an episode, we're gonna trot this out.
Yep.
So Steve,
okay.
Do you want to kick us off?
So I can't remember if we talked about this. This is the problem now. This director, I can't remember if we talked about some of them, but you have to try and remember. Did we talk?
So I still have. I still have my list that I talked through, but I don't know. I can't remember the ones that you talked through. So we'll see.
Okay. Did we talk about Spielberg?
I don't believe we did. No.
No, I think we didn't. So last time we steered away from some of the really big ones and chose some not vague ones, but some that are slightly off the beaten path. But I thought he's been such a massive influence on me and my watching films my entire life. I kind of feel like I have to mention Steven Spielberg. Just never mind the amount of films that he's done, but the variety is ridiculous in his life. It's absolutely ridiculous, and he's done every genre under the sun at this point, from the most powerful, heartbreaking films of your life, from Schindler's List and Private Ryan, to fantastic adventure with all of the indie films, to crazy things in between. It's kind of amazing a career that he's had. It's astonishing.
Yeah, and was also essentially the creator of the summer blockbuster, right?
Yeah.
So the whole thing kicked off with Jaws originally. So traditionally, summer wasn't a time for big movies because everybody should be outdoors having fun at the beach, and then he capitalized on that by making this relatively low budget movie called Jaws, which just went absolutely huge. And after that, the summer blockbuster was a big thing, and it's really interesting. So that was he'd done a fair amount of TV before that.
Yeah.
So I remember watching a documentary about Steven Spielberg, and one of the things that he did was he was a director on Columbo with Peter Falk. And they actually talked through some of the things that he was doing, because this was a massively popular TV show where they were churning out loads and loads of episodes. But they actually said, even though at the time Spielberg was a young guy, he was doing loads of really interesting things. Like he was filming some of his choice of shots were like really original and novel. Like he was filming scenes from like across the road, from like a really long distance away, and doing all sorts of interesting stuff. And then he did a TV movie called Duel, which I remember, which is just a very basically about a truck driver that has it in for a car driver,
right,
and is just basically trying to run him off the road. Very small film. Did a couple of other little things, and then Jaws, then Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T.
But that's within the space of a few years. So Jaws is 75. Close Encounters is 77, and then Raiders was 81. So in 6 years, and of course E.T. in 82, it's just that the scale is insane. He's gone from not a nobody, but from a guy who's not that well known, who's done bits and pieces, to being catapulted into the starlight, some of the biggest films ever. And then suddenly, he invented the summer movie. He changed cinema in a way that it's kind of hard to get your head around.
And you're absolutely right as well when you say just the breadth of the different things that he's done. So everything from these sort of summer popcorn blockbusters like Jaws and Raiders of the Lost Ark and Jurassic Park, and then all of these other things. So Munich was a film that I really loved. So it was about an assassination that happened in the Munich Olympics and the sort of fallout from that. And like you say, Schindler's List, love stories.
Colour Purple.
The Colour Purple.
Empire of the Sun. Those two films are incredibly powerful, moving, amazing films. And then he goes and does something fun like Hook. And you're like, wow. I mean, there's another guy on my list I want to talk about later who hasn't exactly been pigeonholed. He's obviously drawn to certain material, and that's what he does, and he does it exceptionally well. The amazing thing about Spielberg is that he can come in and do something that's moving and heartfelt, and you can rewatch for year after year after year. And then there's other people who lean towards one kind of thing. So he's such a kind of, I don't know, he's not a generalist. He can turn his hand to any kind of direction. It's brilliant.
I think it's hard to name a director that's had as much influence on movies as Steven Spielberg, and just everything that he's turned his hand to has been incredible. Even the Tintin movie was just a delight, and I wasn't expecting anything from it, but he just turned it into something that I thought was so brilliant. And then War Horse, which started out as a play, where the main interesting thing about the play was the way that they used puppeteering to bring the horse to life, but the fact that he actually translated that into a movie, and the movie was a masterpiece as well. Just such an incredible director. Hard to name somebody that accomplished. There's people out there that do absolutely superb work, but just everything that he touches seems to be a masterpiece.
Oh yeah. He's definitely created and worked on some of my favourite films of my entire life. That have had a massive impact, and some of our friends, of course, like Barry, have been hugely influenced by his work with things like Indiana Jones and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, an incredible guy. I thought, I couldn't not mention him. So who have you got on your list?
Okay, so it's interesting looking. So when you mentioned Spielberg, I looked him up on IMDb, and it's really interesting that so he directed a whole bunch of things. So Jaws was the thing that kind of threw him into the point where everybody knew the name Spielberg, but he'd actually been working for a long time before that. First of all, doing sort of short films, and then doing a bunch of TV work. He was clearly building his craft over a long time. I find the next director is kind of very interesting. That he basically went from 0 to 100 in a very short space of time.
Right.
So the first full-length movie he directed is, of course, the movie that we've all seen and is a classic, Piranha 2: The Spawning.
What?
And then his next film, just a couple of years later.
Yeah.
And then so he directed Piranha 2: The Spawning, and then his run after that is, and you'll know instantly who I'm talking about.
Go on.
Terminator, Aliens, The Abyss, Terminator 2, True Lies, Titanic, Avatar.
Cameron. I mean, James Cameron.
Yeah, obviously everybody knows we're talking about James Cameron, but such a rise to fame, right? In such a Steven Spielberg before Jaws has got IMDb credits going back 16 years.
Yep.
James Cameron, very low budget Piranha movie, which I've seen, and then the next thing that he did was the Terminator, which was very low budget, but Arnie wasn't a huge name. It's the thing that launched Arnie into the spotlight after doing a couple of really, really bad films. And then he does Terminator, and then Aliens, and then he went from 0 to 100 in a really short space of time. And again, he's somebody. So he's somebody that everything that he does is really popular, and I think that almost makes it difficult to recognize what a genius he is actually constructing these worlds and telling these stories, because he really does do like popcorn films, right? Like these hugely entertaining things, but just what a visionary director.
Well, but yeah, he is. Oh, I agree with all of that. But also there's the thing that he's moved cinema on in a way, technically, that people probably don't realize. So when he worked on some of the films, especially later on with the Avatar films, he wanted to do certain things, and the technology didn't exist. Like he'd say, I want a small camera to do this, and say, well, it doesn't exist. So he, would put something on hold and get it made. He'd having built the prototypes, the originals, the new things that then later on become an industry standard to do a particular type of shot or a particular type of thing. And he's created technology that has driven on cinema and CGI and special effects that people will then just start using, like, oh yeah, it should just be there. It's like, hang on, this guy wanted to do this stuff. It's like if you go back to Hitchcock. There again, he wanted to do certain things and get certain camera shots that didn't exist. So he'd invent them, and now people refer to the certain types of shot, or the dolly shot, or this one, or zoom in whilst doing. And there again, it didn't exist, but he wanted it. He had it in his mind, something he could see, and he wanted it created, and he found a way to do it. And James Cameron's done the same thing time and again, but obviously the technology is more advanced compared to the days of Hitchcock. But he's done it. He's picked it up and he's driven it on, and an absolute visionary of cinema, really.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. So I was saying that his directing credits went from 0 to 100 really quickly, but actually he'd been working in movies for quite a long time, and he's a very, very technical person, and that sort of feeds into what you were talking about. So he originally was involved in doing like special effects work and like visual effects and all sorts of things like that. So he worked on Escape from New York, doing visual effects for John Carpenter. He worked on Battle Beyond the Stars. He worked on he was doing special effects on a movie called Galaxy of Terror that a lot of people haven't seen, but I really like. The reason that he ended up directing Piranha 2 was because he was actually doing special effects on the set of Piranha, the original Piranha movie. And the fact that he comes from this sort of very, very technical background feeds into exactly what you were saying, that he's responsible for inventing loads of technology that hadn't been seen before in all sorts of things. So you think about The Abyss. There was loads of really innovative CGI was in The Abyss. Years before Jurassic Park came out, The Abyss was late 80s, and then all of the water effects and the CGI that was in there was really, really interesting. Again, all of the interesting CGI that was in Titanic, including digital actors and things like that, which we hadn't seen before. All of the original stuff in Avatar. And now he's just obsessed with Avatar. Looking at his credits, we've got Avatar 2, Avatar 3, Avatar 4, Avatar 3. He's just all about the Avatar now. But I can tell you my favourite James Cameron quote, if you like.
Go on.
So James Cameron was sort of at the forefront of this trend of 3D movies, which has kind of died a death a little bit now. We're not as obsessed with it as we was, but Avatar was one of the driving forces behind that. And I've got a film that he didn't direct. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but he was the executive producer on it, and they filmed it in 3D a couple of years after Avatar came out. And on the extra features of this film that nobody's seen except for me, they're interviewing James Cameron, and the interviewer asked the question, so, James, why did you think that this film should be shot in 3D? And his response was, I'm James Cameron. I film my kids' birthday parties in 3D. Brilliant. So, yeah. Again, just such a brilliant, influential director. Not directed. So Steven Spielberg directed, I think, looking back, he's got about 60 credits as director.
Yep.
James Cameron's got closer to 20, but what a 20.
Yeah, yeah. He's done some incredible things. So my next one is a director that I was going to mention anyway. I said that he's not exactly been pigeonholed, but he's chosen his projects following his particular interests. Now, he's done a lot of stuff in TV too, and he's still doing it in TV, but he's done a lot of interesting films. But there again, he doesn't have hundreds of interesting film credits, and this is David Fincher.
Yes, what a genius.
So, of course, you mentioned Alien 3. He directed that back in the day, and I don't think that was his first big film, but before then, he'd done a lot of short videos, a lot of music videos. He'd worked with very big people like Madonna and a lot of Paula Abdul for some reason, and Aerosmith and so on. So he'd done a lot of of music videos, but then he came on and started doing, I pulled up some of my favorites that he's done. So Zodiac, Panic Room, World War Z, The Game, Seven, of course, which is a huge film, The Social Network, which is more recent, Fight Club, of course, he directed that, Gone Girl, A Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, I think that was the original English language one, with Daniel Craig, because they've redone that again, haven't they? Anyway,
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So, but he's got a very, very particular style and a very particular kind of interesting subject, because at the moment he's directing a TV show, some episodes that I'm watching, called Mindhunter. Yep. Which is all about the establishment of the FBI's behavioral science unit, which looks into serial killers. And you can kind of look back over his work and see connective tissue from whether it's Seven or Zodiac, which of course dealt with serial killers, the Zodiac serial killer, and so on. So there's certain things that he leans into that he's obviously interested in, and he has a very particular style.
He does, yeah. So, we were saying with Steven Spielberg, the breadth of the stuff that he's done is amazing, and in all sorts of different styles. I think David Fincher is probably one of the few directors that I would know they directed it, even if I hadn't seen the credit.
Yeah.
And you're right. So there's an absolutely amazing YouTube channel that I would recommend everybody checks out. I don't know whether you've seen it, Steve, called Every Frame a Painting.
No.
So in Every Frame a Painting, it's somebody doing movie analysis where they sort of, really dissect what a director is doing in particular scenes.
Right.
And one of the videos is about David Fincher's style. And he has a very unique way of moving the camera, and he basically moves the camera in time with what the main actor you should be focusing on is doing. It's very hard for me to describe. If you're listening to this, you should go and check out this analysis. But it's a very peculiar way of actually using the camera, and the way that they dissect it. The person that runs this YouTube channel is saying, this take must have taken dozens of attempts, because basically the way the camera is moving and the person is moving is exactly in sync with each other.
Wow.
It's really fascinating, and once it's one of those things that when you're just watching the movie, he's able to make you feel. He's able to make you respond to characters in a certain way that isn't immediately obvious to you why you're doing that, until this person who's a lot cleverer than me about these things unpicks it. But it's fascinating. And so the thing that, despite all of these things that he's directed that I really loved, like Alien 3, Seven, Fight Club, all of these things are brilliant. The thing that brings it home to me, what an absolutely genius director he is The Social Network.
Yeah.
Because that is a subject that I have absolutely zero interest in at all. I had no interest in watching it. It just happened to, get put on the TV one day, and I was on the edge of my seat for that entire film.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, if you can do that on a subject that I have zero investment in, fair play to you. That's the mark of a real genius.
Yeah. But you're right, he does have a very particular style. Spielberg, I wouldn't necessarily recognize one of his films if he's been directing it, but you could put on a David Fincher film halfway through, and you would know. I think it's the same as other people. They just have a particular way of doing things and particular subject. You could have a very good guess and say, yeah, I think that's a Fincher film, and you'd be right. But yes, so again, he doesn't have hundreds of film credits. He's obviously choosing things more carefully, but they've all been, relatively successful. But he's still doing lots of video shorts, and then now he's doing TV as well, executive producing and directing it and stuff. So, very interesting guy. Very interesting. So who's next on yours?
Okay, so I'm looking at my list to see who I'm going to go for. So I'm going to go for somebody that's kind of, I think, at the opposite end of popularity.
Right.
So this is somebody. Not everybody hates him.
Roman Polanski. Woody Allen. No. Oh,
no.
Okay.
So when I say at the opposite end of popularity, I'm saying this is somebody that hasn't done absolutely massive blockbusters, but has done some of my favourite films that are popular but aren't like the hugest films ever made.
Okay.
And I'll be interested in hearing your opinion of him. So this is John Carpenter.
Ah, yes. So he's often referred to as a cult director, which is a weird way of putting it. I think I'm not necessarily certain I would recognize one of his films. So he has certain things that he does, that's for sure. But I'm not necessarily, if I saw compared to like a Fincher direction, I would know it was a Carpenter film. So I like many of the films that he's done, but weirdly, I'm not particularly a fan of the horror ones. But I like I love the Snake Plissken, Escape from New York, Escape from LA, Big Trouble in Little China, which we've done on Bags of Action and that kind of thing. Assault on Precinct 13, things like that. So then he's done the. I don't want to besmirch Carpenter's name by mentioning this and mentioning in relation to this other director, but there's a bit of that. I think Quentin Tarantino's borrowed a bit from Carpenter. Like if you look at the films that he's done, they're very, very different. Like he'll do like vampires, and then he'll go and do like a sci-fi film, and then he'll go and do like, I don't know, a western or something. And he just picks and chooses very unusual things. And I think Tarantino's borrowed some of that from Carpenter.
Yeah, I think. So you're absolutely right. People do say that Carpenter's a cult director. I kind of feel what they mean by that is that the stuff that he does is typically sufficiently low budget that people are willing to leave him alone and do his own thing.
Right.
Because he does, there are certain features of a John Carpenter movie. So one is that he typically writes the theme tune as well as directing the movie.
He does, and some great ones.
Yeah, and I love the Escape from New York theme. And Assault on Precinct, very minimal sort of scores.
Yeah,
but really, really underscore what's happening in the action, and just again, so many things of. I think he's probably a director where I loved everything that he was doing as a child, but I never made a connection that all of these things were being done by the same person.
Right, okay.
So as a kid, I loved, I shouldn't have watched it, loved it. I saw it on Precinct 13.
Oh, right, okay.
The Fog is one of the few films that totally scared me to death as a kid.
Halloween.
Then Halloween, Escape from New York, The Thing, Big Trouble in Little China, I loved.
Yeah.
They Live. I was watching all of these things and thinking they were absolutely fantastic. And then only probably years later realised that, hold on, it was one person that was behind all of these things. And again, he's we were talking about him directing and doing the score. He's involved in the writing of the, he's definitely somebody that you would probably consider an auteur in that you know, his hand is in every single aspect of the production of one of his films. And yeah, not a huge director, but just one of those people who I just love everything that they do.
Yeah, and of course they've redone Halloween again and again and again, and they've just done another one. But I don't think he was involved in the most recent one.
No, I don't think so. And obviously they redid The Thing a few years ago with Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
Right.
They redid Assault on Precinct 13, which I've not seen the remake of. I don't know whether it was any good or not, but yeah. So they're remaking a lot of his things, but a lot of these things are. I'm not saying that he has the same really strong style as David Fincher, but because his hand is involved in every aspect of it, you can't remake a John Carpenter film and expect it to sort of capture that same magic.
No, not in the same way. Summertime he came back to the well, and I don't think he should. Like they did Escape from New York, which is brilliant, and then I watched Escape from LA recently. I thought I'd seen it before. I hadn't, it turned out. So I watched it and did a review for Bags of Action. It wasn't good. It's really not good.
No, it's not, is it?
It was like, oh no. Oh dear. But yeah. Go on.
The scary thing for me with Escape from LA is that I remember Escape from New York as a kid thinking it was absolutely superb and loving it. And then they recently did Escape from LA and it wasn't anywhere near as good. They did Escape from LA 23 years ago. If you'd have asked me, I'd have said they did it like 10 years ago, not 23 years ago.
The millennium was 19 years ago, Scott. To me, it was about 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah. Is it 19? What? Yeah. It's 2020 next year, Scott. This is scary. This is terrifying.
It sure is.
Oh. Oi. Right. Do we want to do any more, or do we want to leave it there?
Shall we leave it there? We've been going for about an hour, so shall we leave it there and save the other 100 items that we've got on the list for another time?
There's a lot more we could talk about. There's a lot more. So give us some of your recommendations for who we should be talking about. Get off your bum and get in touch with the show. You can email us, grouchogeeks@gmail.com. You can come onto the Geek Syndicate website and get in touch with us through there. Don't forget to leave us an iTunes review. That would be nice. Thank you very much. But yes, who are some of your favourite directors? Let us know. And look up that what's it called again? Paint by frame?
So it's Every Frame a Painting.
Every Frame a Painting. Okay, right. I'll have to look up that as well. Yes. So don't forget to look that up as well. Okay, that's it for this month. In the meantime, it's good night from me.
And it's good night from him.
Good night.
Good night.